Good morning. This is Chris Fenn from Artistic Artifacts, and we're here with Ann Wright, who's designed yet another ruler for Creative Grids. And we're happy to have Creative Grids as one of our co-hosts today, because we're a Creative Grids store and we sell lots of your rulers, but we also sell other rulers. If people have seen me before, I'm a big stripology fan, so and I'll actually talk a little bit about how I use the stripology in making your samples. But we thought we would talk today, Ann's latest ruler, and this might be a little hard to see, Kyle, is her skinny 10-inch curvy log cabin trim tool. And what I wanted to do is ask Ann how she decides that she's making a new ruler, and how from once you decide you need to make a new ruler, because that's what the shower told you, how do you go about making that ruler?
Well, there's two ways I decide to make a new ruler. Sometimes the company calls me and said, we've had shops requesting a ruler in this size. For instance, they wanted a larger curvy, so we decided on a 10-inch.
Because we had a 4-inch.
And a 6-inch and an 8-inch.
So we've used the 4-inch and we've used the curvy 6-inch. So
right.
They ask you to create the 10-inch.
They said, will you create a 10-inch? So then I had to decide how to do that. So generally what I do is I think about it for a while. Sometimes I dream about it. And I knew if I did a 10-inch, I wanted more rounds around, because the others had just 3 or 4 rounds. See, that one just has 1, 2, 3. And then some of them have 4. That one is still 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. And I don't have the 8-inch ones, a sample of the 8-inch one.
So, and then the 8-inch has 4, and this one has 5. So it gives you a better idea of a circle. So then I have to think about how I'm going to make it work. And I do most of my designing on the computer using the Adobe Illustrator program, because it's pretty exacting. It's not exacting as CAD-CAM, but I'm not going there.
Once you learn one, it's easier just to stick with the one that you know.
Exactly. Plus, they will take my Adobe art and then they will redo it on their CAD-CAM. So I don't feel like I need to learn a new CAD-CAM program. Enough is enough. So that's how I decide. But this was their request, that they wanted a 10-inch, more strips. But when I get an idea for a ruler, like even the very first one, which was a log cabin ruler.
Was that this 10-inch?
The very first 8-inch.
Oh,
I did.
okay.
This was later.
Okay.
I think about it. Sometimes I dream it and I get up and think, that's how the first one started. I thought, oh, that will work. And so, because I was making log cabin blocks and they were always wonky before I had a wonky ruler.
Yes. And
I like it to be uniform. So I figured out how to do that and then trim the rounds each time to make them work. So I dream about it, work it on the TV. Sometimes I think of it in the shower, how to make it. But it's all visualized before I start doing it on the computer.
How do you decide? I know each ruler tells you how wide the strips need to be.
Cut. Mm-hmm.
How do you decide that part of it?
Well, I like the strips to be cut 1/4 of an inch. For instance, this is a 1/2-inch strip.
Okay, so that's 1/4 of an inch larger than it's going to end up. Well,
right. So on your regular thing, if you're using a 1/2-inch strip, you'd cut 1 inch because you have your 1/4 inch seam allowance on each end. But because I want to trim, I add yet another 1/4 of an inch. Okay. And that's the part you're going to trim off.
Okay.
So that's how I decide that. So then I have to work out the math. And sometimes it's like, these were nice, they were even 1/2 inches, but sometimes it's 5/8 of an inch or something. So we have to work that in. And when we do that, then you might have a little bit more to trim, but we like to have plenty to trim so you don't mess up, because it's easy to mess up. So that's how I decide.
But once you get started, it isn't. It's
right.
Once
I get it going,
yeah.
Once I get it going, it works. And the nice thing about the Illustrator program is I can do it, and then if it's too big, let's say I did this and it with all the strips, it had come out to be
12 inches,
12 or even 11, some odd size. Then I can just size it down automatically using the computer program. I don't have to do the math. which is very good for someone who made D in geometry in high school.
Thank
And
God
is
for
now-
computers.
Now is doing all this geometric work, which is not a challenge on the computer. So that's how I do it.
So how does it go from your idea and what you have in Adobe to what Creative Grids does?
So first of all, I check with them to make sure it's an idea they would be interested in, because I'm not going to spend hours doing something that they say, oh, we don't want to do that. But if they're interested, then I get down and do the artwork, which I send to them, and they have a committee that decides which rulers they're going to do. So they take it to their committee and they talk about it and say, will this work and how will it work? And when that happens, I print it out on a piece of transparent plastic on my computer, and then I have blanks. Now this is not quite a blank, but I know you can't see this, but I paste my transparent printout onto one of these blanks, and then that's how I use it. And then so we work with a blank for a while, and my printed out thing, which is
if we put it against this, if it works.
which isn't as perfect as we want it to be, but
This might work.
yeah. Let's see. You see, there you go.
Yes.
You can see. And so that's what we call the etched version. So then they give us an etched version, and we see how it works with the etched version. If we're happy with the etched version, then we move to the printed version. So it's a long process. It's usually a couple months between the idea for the ruler, to get it through the committee, to get it to this point, and then to this point.
Yeah, because Creative Grids sent me this
Right.
version back in the summer.
Right.
So that was maybe June, early July.
Right.
For me to test the ruler for Jean Ann and for Creative Grids. This is what I got. And it was like, okay,
What do I do
how
with
do
it?
I do that? Well, fortunately, because I had done the 4 and the 6, I had those directions, and I understood the process of where, if you're cutting, this is your first round and your first round,
Right.
And so you have to move the ruler. So I knew enough
To work with it.
about the process to make my samples, which I did in 2 different colorways. And actually the first one I did was this one, because I didn't understand, and she'll talk a little bit about the process of whether you use your wide strips first or your narrow. But this was the first one I did, using some Celeste from Sally Kelly. And so that was my test. And so I was able then to send it back to Creative Grids and Jean Ann to say, it's a go, it works, everything was, the sizing was right and whatever else.
All right, so here's those same 4 blocks that I made yesterday, believe it or not. And this one starts like you did with an arrow, but I put my dark sides together first, and so you get a totally different look when you do that. And so that's kind of the fun of the ruler too, is that you can have 2 possibilities for design.
Well, in this, both of these are using the wide
Wide and narrow.
the skinny first.
And
And
then
then
you can
this one I used
use the wide first.
the wide first. So again, it turns out
Looks different when you use the wide first, because then your circle is more like a ball or a balloon.
Judy, would you give the one that we did with a 4-inch with the cave, the heart one? That's
Oh, okay. Yeah, so there's that one.
so each time you lay them out, I mean, you could still lay this out, and as you did on this one, where you're laying them in different formats. So
Exactly.
it's really fun.
It's fun, all the things that you can do with these curves. Like the quilt behind us, I made using the ruler, and it's got that woven look, in and out, up and down. And I like that because before women were quilting, they were weaving. So to me, this gives the whole weaving look. So this was my my gray and yellow. I've always wanted to make a gray and yellow quilt, and I finally did it. So you can see how and this one starts, let me see, with the wide first and then the narrow. So.
Well, the other question that they asked in the shop the other day was, why is it curvy and rather than just a log cabin? And I thought this was a good example, is by using the curvy with the wider and the narrow strips, you get
a nice curve.
You get a nice curve, almost like a circle.
Yes.
So this one was using the curvy log cabin, the 4-inch, and a straight log cabin.
Right.
But that's why they call them the curvy log cabin rather than just her skinny strips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, in the process of making the rulers, once they've decided, yes, we're going to do that ruler, they send us this, what she showed, which is called the etched version. And when we get that, I have to have testers, other than myself, to try the block to see if it'll work. So Chris is one of my testers, and I have another tester in Ohio, Beth Waite, and they do the testing from these etched versions, and then we move to the printed version finally if we decide it works. The printed versions are very expensive, so we save printing till last, and we know what we've got.
And then it was hard because, what did I test, like I said, in June or July, and it's like, can I show the sample yet?
No.
And it's like, no, because it's released at market.
Yeah, they like to wait for the big release.
So they do the big release. I saw some tempting things on either Checkers or, because I was sending stuff to our buyer saying, it's available, but we can't release it yet.
Yeah.
So were you at market?
No, I quit going to market about 5 years ago. It's just a long haul.
About the same for us.
Yeah.
It's expensive. It's a long haul. It's physically draining.
Exhausting,
Yes.
right, because it's a long day. So then I usually have to make 3 projects each time I do a ruler. So this was my table runner, because I started out with these blocks. I don't know what I was going to use them for. I did not plan these to be a table runner, but I had finished these 6 blocks and I thought, I'm done. So I ended up making this sort of, I don't know, snake-like table runner. And then I didn't want to make any more blocks, so I did the piano key border to finish it off.
Well, and the other thing with these are, I mean, yours that you're using for your tabletop at home, and mine, I used a curated bundle of fabric.
Right.
So that's one way to do it. But it's another way if you've collected scraps.
Or jelly rolls.
Or jelly rolls. It's one way of using the fabrics that you have to make it. But it's, I mean, it was fun to play with the fabrics, and it's like, oh, I still have a few colors to play with. So who knows
actually,
what I might do next.
these were leftovers from some boutique with jelly rolls that I had, and I just wanted to use them
From your roll with the classics jelly roll book.
Right. So then I decided I got a new coffee table because my daughter decided my rectangular one was not working in my room and that I needed a round one. So I have my round coffee table, and this is going to be the table topper for it. So I made these 4 blocks yesterday. The nice thing about the ruler is everything goes together rather quickly with the ruler.
Yeah, it is.
Rather than the old way of.
Well, and the one thing I do that your instructions don't do is you say cut strips for like each round.
Right.
I just use a strip, sew it on, and cut it off.
That's what I do, actually.
Okay. Oh, good.
I know they have in the instructions that to cut this strip so wide and so long. That drives me nuts.
Okay.
I have like this tub or bag or whatever basket of strips. And I just, as long as they're long enough, if they're longer, I just snip off that part, and if it's too short, it goes in the garbage.
So that's what I did with this, was I cut strips of the fat quarter bundles. So my strips were, 20 inches long. I cut 3 or 4 of them, and then I just had the colorways, and each
each one I did, I rotated the color, so they're not.
Right,
It's
not
not.
all
I
the
could have
same.
done it all in the same order or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
I have 3 daughters, and 2 of them like the instructions where you cut everything exact. I know, they hang all their clothes in the closet, color coordinated, facing the same way, etc. And then the 3rd one is me. She's a whatever person. She'll
Well,
just.
It's so much quicker not to have to cut all those and
I
keep
know.
them in order and yeah.
But you know, if you're that type of person, and
Yes.
you couldn't do my way, which is take it out of the grab bag, does it work? Yes,
Yeah.
slap it on. So you have
You're a
to
person
think.
out of our own heart.
You have to think about both kinds
Yes,
of people when you're
absolutely.
designing, because we want everyone to love the ruler. So on this one, because of a round coffee table, I've got this Creative Grids ruler, which is called Roundup Tool. And after Sue quilts it, we'll talk about that in a minute, I may round the corners. I haven't decided. I have to wait to see what she does first. So,
And we're going to bring Sue on in just a minute.
yeah, she'll talk about that. But
Did you want to just show how you use the trim ruler on the blocks? that you have?
yes, okay, I'll show you how I use it. And I am going to absolutely give you my word of caution, which I did not follow. Because you can see I have a Band-Aid on my finger. I had just a little, about 2-inch long piece thing that I needed to trim 3 weeks ago, and so I thought, oh, I don't need to bother to put my, where is my finger caught? It's red.
Oh, here it is on the floor here.
Oh, okay. I didn't need to put this on just to cut a little 2-inch slice. Well, I managed to cut the 2-inch slice in part of my finger. So, here's what I do. You can get these at office supply stores. They're called finger cots. And they're used
It's when they were filing papers. And
yes, that's when, I don't know how long they're going to be available because everyone files everything on computers now.
Oh,
So-
we use them in restaurants.
Oh, they use them in restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thank goodness.
How do they use them in restaurants? For cutting?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Anybody, if you get a nick on your finger or something like that, you can't go
Right.
back to a table without one.
All right, so anyways, I didn't think these were trim, but they are. But I just put it on and then trim. And I always go up and across. And
So
then,
what you've done though, I think show them that you're
Oh,
on
yeah.
your third, your 1, 2, 3.
yeah, this is the third. So it says here, wide, round 3. So I put that right over my center square. And then I do my trimming. And then once I trim up and across, then it's time to trim the narrows. So I turn it and narrow round 3. You got to read the and you got to remember which is your center. And you put it on, and then you just trim up and across. So you can see if the thing was too long. If you're like me and you're just grabbing a strip out and it's been too long, you're going to cut it to the right size when you trim. So that's why I don't cut mine. But there are people who work
Yes.
for Creative Grids that I like very much, but they go crazy if they can't have that chart that says how long to cut them. So
You do it both ways.
we do it because there are both kinds of people. I managed to give birth to both kinds of people.
Well, the other thing that I was thinking about, because we've been talking about Creative Grids, is the other tool that I use, and I didn't need to use it for this one, is the new mini stripology ruler
stripologies.
that has cuts at 1/4 inch and 8 inch. So this ruler that you need, the narrow strips are 1 1/8 to 1 1/4 inch wide. So rather than trying to use your big 24-inch ruler or whatever, I found that this was very
yes.
helpful to cut the more narrow strips.
It really is.
So this is the Stripology Quarters Mini, and that's a new one. I think they just came out
They did.
with GE Designs did it. And I've used it a number of times, I think, on some of our YouTube videos.
Right.
But it's really a helpful tool.
It really is. So all of the tools that are just managed so that, I started quilting before we had rotary cutters.
So
We
did
won't
I.
Talk about
And you
how
had
long
paper templates and that you used a pencil to
Correct.
outline it. Yes.
Well, we used sandpaper templates because they wouldn't slide, but it was very labor intensive. And when they came out with the rotary cutters, I was like, yes.
Well, that's, to me, I said the rotary cutter was my first, man, what a difference that made. Stripology ruler was the next one for me. It was as revolutionary for my own sewing as the rotary cutter. So now let's invite your quilter up.
Right.
So how about your collaboration on
Sue
these
Bentley
quilts?
does all of my quilting. So like I said, I threw these 4 blocks together yesterday. It did take most of the day, folks. I didn't do anything else. The dishes are in the sink.
We won't tell.
Okay, don't
You
tell.
just told the whole world, but we won't tell.
So one of the first things that I think about when I'm debating a long arm design is the density. And for a table topper to go on a coffee table, I'd like something quilted kind of dense so that it has some weight to it. And I was looking at this, and you know, a lot of times with the grunge fabric I like to use something with dots, so that's an idea. There's some stars, but then I noticed in the white fabric there's a little flower, and I happen to have purchased this stamp at last Saturday's Small Business Saturday, and I'm going to use this as inspiration for using a design on this. And I may go with a color, you know, something like this, yellow or would really pop, or even a blue. And so that's what I'm thinking right now.
So how do you take, I mean, just like I asked Jean Ann, is how do you take the design thought from the wood block and convert it into your quilt design? Is that done on the computer as well?
Yes.
So do you scan a picture of that in, or do you just play?
Generally, I just play.
Because you're very experienced.
If I am in a hurry, then I'll probably do a search on the internet for a similar design. And in fact, I know I have one fairly similar to this already. But there are, you know, I also use my iPad and an app to kind of preview a design, and that'll help with the density issue. So I say, oh, how close do I really want all this? And then another one was this quilt, which you can't quite see it, but it has bright yellow thread, and I don't remember the exact name of this. It's Feather Frolic or something like that, but it's kind of a more modern feather design, and I was inspired by the border. And so the density sort of matches the wider blocks, and that's how I picked that one.
Mm-hmm. Now in this quilt, there's 4 different block color arrangements, which are all in the pattern that we have that you can order from Cut Loose Press.
So that is a cut loose.
Oh yeah, all of these are. This is not yet a Cut Loose Press pattern, but it will be. And so you just, I try to be very methodical because I don't like to read directions. I just don't. So I put a lot of pictures in my directions. So I'll say,
And they work.
And they work. Make 4 that look like this. Make 4 that look like that, or 6 or 10 or whatever it is. And because some of them have wide gray and some of them have narrow gray, wide yellow, and narrow yellow. So there's 4 different arrangements, and you just have to look at the picture and know that you're going to make X amount of each one. And so that's how I do my directions. And believe it or not, I have one more to show you. This is my pillow.
This one.
And this is your Curvy log cabin, but
Is that Tilda fabric?
yeah, Tilda fabric. I got it here.
I can tell.
So
We are her local quilt shop.
Yep. So what I did was I did wide and then narrow, but by doing them all in the same colors, I don't get a curvy look at all. I get a square shadow box. Look.
Oh, okay, now I see it.
Say that again.
By having the colors, I had the red for my center, and then I did 2 whites, and then I did 2 blue narrows and 2 blue wides.
Oh, wow.
And then 2
That's
white
beautiful.
narrows and 2 white wides. And by doing that, I got this sort of off-center shadow box look. So there's more things that you can do with the
You
ruler.
know what? I think I might have to wait a minute. You don't need to follow me.
So I just wanted to say I'm one of those ones that likes to pick out that next strip from the bag. But as you can see, there's lots of options. If you're interrupted or sew in small increments of time, sometimes cutting those strips the length you need them saves you from accidentally creating a block you didn't mean to create.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. So this, I love this idea. So I think my next rosy bag, which is another cut loose pattern, the pocket will be this. So I have made probably 6 or 7 of the rosy bags, which is Jean Ann's pattern. And each one I've used a different one of her rulers on it. This one uses the wonky log cabin. So it's a great bag, and like she said, the instructions I've added
Inside pocket.
I've added 2 inside pockets. So I've added some inside pockets to it using the fabric that I had left over. I've actually added a magnetic because I put such heavy stuff in it. But again, another cut loose pattern, but that's where my next block is going.
Yeah. Well, I have sort of a jelly roller addiction. So I've got stacks of jelly rolls. So when I do this, yes, there's waste, but at least I'm using up my jelly rolls.
But then you can use the waste on something else.
That's true. You can always use the waste on something else.
So I have another question for you, since we're talking about your creative process. I understand you're working on another book.
Right. Actually, it's not another new book. It's
An update of an existing book.
Right. My pineapple book is pretty much sold out. So my publisher, Fox Chapel, contacted me and said they wanted to reprint it, but they wanted to include the new 12-inch pineapple ruler. So I did 4 new projects for that, and it'll be out probably early next summer.
So that was using the Creative Grid pineapple trim tool.
Right. It uses the 4-inch, the 6-inch, the 8-inch, and now the 12. I mean, it's a 4, 6, and 10.
Okay.
And now the 12. So that's going to be coming out in the fall.
Okay.
So I've got 4
So
more
that'll be
projects.
another Quilt Market release.
Right. So then the question is, what do you do with blocks that you put together and you don't like them, which I do all the time? I make pot holders. I don't know why. I know when I first started quilting, I thought, oh, whoever wants to make a pot holder. But it's a great way to use up
Well, and what I'm going to do,
things that didn't quite work.
is much like you did there. I was playing when I finished these. Is how do I want to lay them out?
Right.
So because again, I don't need a square. So will I lay them out this way?
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways.
So I can do it
You get
that
that
way,
diagonal.
similar to what you've done there.
Right.
But I think what I'm going to end up doing is I'll probably make some table runners. And I've got 4 blocks at 10-inch blocks. That's 40 inches long. Add a little trim around it, and I've got a nice sized table runner. And I would say these 4 blocks probably took me, I already had the strips cut. Didn't take me much more than an hour. So once you get the first one done and you've I do 1 block at a time. I'm not doing strip piecing like I would for something else, but it goes together really quickly once you've kind of learned that, okay, I need to use my wide square, and then I need to turn it to that. And that's real, to me, that was the part I had to get that mind-hand coordination, is remembering to turn the ruler to cut it.
See, I usually do 4 blocks at a time so I can do chain piecing.
Yes.
So when you're using scraps, it's no problem. But I spent as much time thinking yesterday as I did sewing. I started this, like I said, yesterday morning because I wanted to do a table runner, and I thought, well, I'll take it down there as part of the program. And so I had to figure out how I was going to place my colors, because this is going to be in my living room. I'm a lot fussier.
Yes. Well, the difference with this one is versus this is you've put them all in the same place. So each block is identical versus each of mine is different.
And I very rarely do each block identical, but for this project I just felt like it
it's
needed
beautiful.
to be. So, and like I said, when Sue quilts it, I may round off the corners because it's going on a round table runner, and then I will use this lovely round up tool to do my rounding on the corners.
Okay.
You can't really put it on the whatever to quilt it if it is rounded already.
Kyle, did we have any questions?
We did actually. We did ask. We had someone asking for a demo on the stripology ruler that you mentioned, but we don't have time for that today. Maybe we can do something.
Well, I
another
can
time.
actually just sew very quickly.
Yeah. We have a rotary cutter here. Do you have a piece of fabric? We can just rip it up, stitch it up. Do you have a scrap?
Sue, can you just get one of those scraps back there, please?
I love these rulers. I usually use jelly rolls for my wide strips, but I cut my narrow strips and then I use a stripology ruler. Normally this would have been pressed.
Yes. This was actually from last week's hand stitching.
And then all these patterns we've been talking about. Where can you find them?
Okay, it's called Cut Loose Press. It's also by
We have some cut loose patterns on our website. I know the Rosy Toad is on there. I believe some of her other table runners are. I'm not sure if we have this one in the store, but I mean you can find cut loose patterns out there.
you can download them as PDFs from the internet.
Okay.
So
what this ruler is, it can tell me if I want a 1 3/4 inch strips that I'm going to use these cutting lines. But much like any of the other ones, if I'm using a 0 and a 1, I want to cut a 1 inch strip. This one's a little bit wide. I'll do it this way.
cutter.
So if I'm cutting a 1 inch strip, I've got it on the 0 and the 0, or if I'm squaring it up, you put it, there's an opening in the ruler, so you're cutting actually right through in that opening. So if I'm cutting a 1 inch strip, and the nice part is there's 4 strips that are just 1 inch. You can also use this to square up. There's the 1/4 inch, and as with every, actually I don't see that this one has.
What?
Every other ruler from Creative Grids has got the QR.
The dots.
No, the QR, so you could
Oh, yeah.
actually go to the instructions and it will actually give you the instructions on the computer. They come with instructions, but they also have them on here. This one doesn't have that on it. I use the Mastering the Stripology Ruler book on how to use this. I would imagine that the instruction, the paper thing that came with this has a QR code. And that's at home. So, but their rulers, their instructions are great. And if you lose a paper one, you can go to the QR code, and you can. Well, and I download the PDF, and then I have it on my iPad, so I can pull it up into books.
Right.
So, I think any more questions at all, Kyle?
We did, well, not so much a question, but maybe a hope to do a workshop with your new ruler.
Oh. It didn't have to be a one-dayer. I don't do many workshops anymore.
That's what they were saying. They were like, oh, maybe this would be great for a one-day workshop. I think that
I
was
would do it
Katarina.
if it were here, but I don't really travel as much anymore.
Well, and the other is we can talk about. I don't do workshops either. I do.
What?
But I might think about it.
We could do it together if we think about it.
So, because I don't even know that it needs to be a full day, because I think what you can do is you could do a couple hours of just getting you into the process, using the
Right.
ruler, and then go home. So you wouldn't walk out with a finished quilt, but you would
Right.
end up with finished blocks.
And once you get used to using, now my rulers are all like trim tools, like this. And so once you get used to the concept of using a trim tool, of making your strips over wide and then trimming them to the exact size so that your block always comes out perfect, It transfers to all of the other rulers.
Yeah.
The
yeah.
method, the system.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said when I got the blank ruler to test.
Uh-huh.
I already had done the 4 and the 6 inch, so it was easy to
Right.
understand the concept of switching it from the wide to the narrow side.
But the really best thing about any creative grid rulers are these
the grip.
grippers on the back, because they do not slide when you are cutting, which is really important.
Yes.
Because honestly, a ruler
you don't end
without
up-
the grippers can slide easily.
Well, and I think that's like with the bigger stripology ruler, that I always found that if I was using the long 24-inch ruler to cut strips, that by the time I got up to the end of the mat, my ruler had done that.
Yeah.
My hand just automatically did it, and you don't have that with a
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So that's about it with these. So, any other
All right.
questions?
It's December. We've got we're on winter solstice watch here at the shop. Watch our newsletter and our social media. Each week we have a different sale going on. This week it is 25% off our blender fabrics. People ask what are blenders. They're fabrics that read like solids. So these would be blenders. Actually, this bundle is in the blenders. So they're fabrics that read like solids, but they have a pattern to them. We're into color and texture, so we don't have a lot of solids, clear solids, but we use lots of blenders. And so we've got blenders on sale from Dear Stella, P&B. We've got some Richie Ray. We've got some really cool blenders on sale. So it's a great time to stock up at 25% off, and that sale goes through Wednesday at 5 o'clock when a new sale starts. So stay tuned.
I like using blenders.
Yes,
I don't like using plain solids.
No.
So that's why I had started this, you can see, with the plain solids, and I just didn't like it. And fortunately, I had this in a stash. So,
Yeah, and that's kind of what I just, yeah. So,
and this is just almost a subtle print on print. Well, this is a little bit more.
yeah.
And this is way out of, I mean, this is like 4 or 5 years old, so you're not going to find it.
Yeah.
But these kinds of things you can find all the time, and I love using them. I just don't, for some reason, the plain solids are not as appealing
Yeah, and
to
actually
me.
this one's got texture in it. That's a white on
Yeah.
white designs, yeah. Okay, well,
Yeah.
thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll see you again with your pineapple book.
Right, and I have also got in the works in the brain stage. Well, one is advanced to the computer stage of another ruler, which
Okay.
people are going to love. And then I've got one more that's still in
Okay,
the brain.
just
that
call me when you need to
is
have it
very
tested.
different, and you're going to love that one too.
Okay, too. All right, we
Oh,
look
don't
forward
worry.
to it.
Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay,
You
thank you
and
for having
you.
me.
Yes.